I guess how important is this stretch for y'all? You know, after those two losses, you certainly learned a lot. But how important is this stretch from, you know, UCF to, I don't know, maybe West Virginia? How important is this stretch for y'all?
I think you learn that everybody in the Big 12 is good, and anybody in the league can be beat. Going into this second half, you know, it's a blessing that we're still at the top, and we still have a chance to compete for a conference championship.
For you in this last game, obviously you didn't score a whole lot, but you were distributing pretty well. I mean, are you okay with kind of taking a back seat to what you're used to and scoring a lot and distributing like you were?
Yeah, I don't think, I've really scored a lot this season. Anyways, I think, you can affect the game in more ways than just scoring. I think, when it's your night, and that's what's so special about this team, that it can be anybody's night on any given night. But I love passing the ball. I get in trouble sometimes for passing the ball too much, honestly. So passing the ball is like what I love to do.
Sarah, what the game that Bella had, how important was that for her and maybe for you guys too to, just you've seen what she's capable of, but for her to have that kind of game?
I think, going into the second half of this type of the season, going into March and getting ready for the big tournament and everything, she needed a game like that to finally see the ball falling like that. I think it was a huge confidence builder for her and a huge confidence builder for us overall. I think, now teams, you really got to pick your poison because so many people in that game had double figures.
Tomorrow is Girl and Women in Sports Day. How important is that for you? And maybe, were there other women that kind of you looked up to as you kind of grew in the game and grew in athletics and that kind of thing?
The women before us paved the way for us. It's a blessing to be able to honestly put a Baylor jersey on. I've always wanted to be at Baylor since I was a little girl growing up watching Odyssey. Those are like my idols. So I think, the women's game has grown tremendously. So it's a huge day for women's basketball tomorrow. And to be a part of something special like this is amazing.
Sarah, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how Matharu has suddenly become an important part of this team from this angle. You've never had a player come in at midterm that you had to adjust to play with. I really haven't remember seeing it done. Talk about how that transition, how has it gone and how can it get so much better?
I think it's going great. I think, everybody understood, at least us inside that locker room and the coaches, we understood at first she was going to struggle because it's hard coming into a new team that already has kind of established this culture and everybody has a rhythm together. We've been together since, June? So her coming in, she was bought into our culture, willing to learn, just soaking everything in like a sponge. And you can finally see it transforming over, her turning that page of the first few games. I think it was nerves when you haven't played in a while, and playing for Baylor fans is always special because they show up night in and night out. But I think, she's finally turning that page of playing games is different versus in practice and getting those reps. So I think she's getting more confidence in herself.
I'd like to jump back a couple of games against two of the top 10 teams in the nation. So tell us, how did that experience playing those two highly rated teams build either confidence or gave you great concern? But just from my angle, so you played the number one team in the nation even for 35 minutes. You played a horrible first 5 minutes, but you did play the nation's number one team even for 35 minutes. Then you go on the home floor of the number 9 team and had a chance to win. So I'm just wondering, psychologically or physically, how do you think those two games either helped or hurt the team?
I think it actually helped the team. I don't ever think, any loss. I mean, it goes on your record and it hurts to lose, but a lot of people learned in that game. Some people hadn't played on a stage like that going against the number one team. So I think like you saw Kayla Nelms get in and get some minutes, and you saw Kyla get in and get some minutes. So to get some experience like that early on, and you never know what'll happen going down in the tournament. So I think it was a huge confidence builder for this team, and I think, we honestly shocked the world and showed people we can play with anybody. We played with the number one team for 35 minutes. We played with TCU for about 35 minutes too. I think, it's just honestly figuring out the first 5 minutes of the game sometimes is where we get ourselves in the hole.
In the new look Big 12, you don't have to play many opponents twice. In the old Big 12, you had to play everyone twice. You played Houston not too long ago. What does that bring to the table as far as seeing an opponent a second time around, and they know what you do, you know what they're going to do?
Playing an opponent a second time is always hard. I don't think people understand, like, especially like our freshman. She doesn't know yet that people scout you even harder. They have our play calls. They know your moves, and like people really buy into knowing what you're going to do, and they try to think a step ahead of you. So us just being ready to be able to flow into our next actions and just understand what we're looking for, where we have the advantage at, where we have the disadvantage, and just taking what we did in the first game and bringing it over to the next game.
In that sense, y'all dominated in the post and the mid-range in that game at home against U of H. Are y'all going to try and go back to that, or after a game coming off of 17 three-pointers, is it just what the actions are going to dictate when y'all see them?
I think regardless of the game, 17 three-pointers or whatever we're doing, our first priority is to get Nettie involved, to have a post presence down there. You're going to throw that ball in every chance you get when you see her numbers. So I don't think it's necessarily about going away from it. It's just putting it all together. I think that makes us an even more dangerous team when we're scoring inside and outside.
You know, this year's team, there's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of experience. I mean, you certainly are the most experienced and have been here the longest.
Yeah.
I guess, how has your leadership kind of role evolved with all these experienced seniors on this team? What is different about it, if at all, this year?
Just making sure everybody knows we're okay, and understanding that teams go on runs. And I've been in big games before, knowing that we can't ever doubt ourselves, no matter what the number is beside the team we're playing, ranked, unranked. We got to take every game serious, and we got to prepare for every game, just like an opponent's preparing for us, not taking advantage of anybody.
I guess, is it different at all? Like, do you feel different on this team at all than you have in years past?
A little bit. I think, I took a backseat role a little bit. Like when I had Liz and Didi and all those players that were older than me, like I wasn't as vocal, but I learned a lot from them. So that's been able to help me lead this team, is be such a vocal leader. Even when I'm not scoring, I know that they look to me to make sure we're okay. So I can never look like we're out of a game because I know they're watching everything that I do. So just being that leader, like, hey, we're fine, and make sure everybody moves on to the next play.
Coach Collen seemed very upset, even though it was a fairly easy win at UCF, about what she refers to as the downhill drives to the basket. Have you all spent time working on that, knowing she was upset about it? The little freshman guard from Cincinnati did it several times Saturday from Duncanville up here. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, is that something you all are working hard to improve?
Yeah, just being disciplined. I think, we showed in the Cincinnati game that we were more disciplined. I mean, we fouled a little bit, but I think we did a way better job of guarding the downhill drives. And it was really just about, no matter what the score was, playing hard, because we know we feed off of our defense. And we know we're going to need that down the line, because it's not always about outscoring your opponent. You got to play some defense. So I think that was the biggest thing, is just getting us to understand that it might not have mattered against UCF, but it might matter later on down the line. Thank y'all.
About Houston, how important is this stretch for you? After a couple losses, you obviously maybe don't play how you wanted against UCF, but then come out really well against Cincinnati. How important is it to string together a few wins here before the final stretch of the season?
Yeah, I think, when you get to conference play, when your goal is to win a conference championship, you have to hold serve. And we can't lose. And so do I think we have a team that can win every game on our schedule? Yes. Does that mean we're going to win every game on our schedule? I hope it does from this point on. But certainly you have to go out and you have to win them. And I think I said before the last game, I've been waiting for this team to kind of have a breakout game. Like I see it in them. But like trying to push the right buttons, get the best out of them, and all of a sudden we just, Bella starts making threes and Aaliyah starts making threes, and all of a sudden the game is easy. It's easy to coach. It's easy to play when the ball goes through that orange ball goes through that rim. And so, I think every game is just one more step in what our goals were going into the season. And you can't take anyone for granted in this league. We saw Oklahoma State go down to Houston and get beat. Houston's a remarkable story. I think about a year ago when TCU was recruiting walk-ons mid-season, and they had more players than Houston took to UCF this past weekend. I mean, they had 5 players go all 40 minutes and only traveled with 6. And so when you think about what they were able to do, it's pretty I give Huey a lot of credit. I mean, I don't know what their original roster, how many they had, but to have multiple season-ending injuries, and then, I think they dressed 8 against us. They had a broken nose on like the second possession of the game. She hasn't played since. Chevalier's been out, Love's been out. So they could have probably found a way to forfeit a game that you're traveling 5, but they were competitive and playing 5. So, as we sit back as coaches and sometimes, think about, wow, well, what if Jana? What if Madison? What if? And then I look at them, I think, okay, let me just count my blessings and like keep coaching the group I've got, because I may not always have 10 for practice, but I think the least we've ever suited up for a game was 9.
Do you think, that the message of, next game and anyone can beat anybody in this, do you think this team with all the seniors and the experience understands that more than maybe others in the past? How does the senior leadership kind of...
I think that helps. We try to remind them in different ways. Like Patino had a presser a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how many guys he has. It doesn't matter if they're on his Kentucky teams, whatever. If I'd have just had one more year, like if I'd have just, when you're done. But I think when you're in that moment, it's really, really hard. Like it's kind of like when you're trying to get them to understand, like, this is a true story. I use this as an example with them. So when Dre Edwards was here and she sat out a whole year, like it was an emotional year for her. We were trying to get her eligible. We couldn't get her eligible. But Dre was so focused in some ways on what she couldn't have that she didn't focus on what that year could be and what that year could mean. Now, did she join a sorority and involve herself in things that student athletes? And now I look at Dre over in Greece doing 75 hard. If you don't know what that is, it's like no sugar, eat clean, 75 straight days, 2 workouts a day. 1 has to be outside. Anytime you don't do something you're supposed to do, you're supposed to start at day 1 again. And I watch these players like leave the nest and then figure out like life. I gotta get in front of life, and how I think if she'd have done 75 soft, that year she was sitting out, how that would impact them. But like when they're in it, they don't understand it. They don't understand it until they leave what they were really a part of and how great this is. And it doesn't matter if I get on my soapbox once every 6 months or once a week, like they have to like ultimately feel that. And I do think there's always a sense with seniors when it's like, wow, it's February already and my time is running out. I do think there's more of a sense of urgency, but if you look across college basketball, you have a lot of teams that are old. You have a lot because of the portal, because of this is the last year, the COVID year. So we're not alone. When you look across at other rosters in our league, there are some young rosters, but most of them are veteran rosters. And so because of that, I think sometimes it takes a team taking the first punch at you for you to like say, okay, yeah, they're here. Like we can't take them for granted. But we certainly talk about it, but you can't. 18 to 22-year-olds, 22 to 23-year-olds, we've got a couple of those. Like it's still kind of, they're still young.
Nicki, it's a couple of games ago, but I mean, that stretch that y'all had with UCLA and TCU, did that help you guys? I mean, because, as Jim said, y'all played with UCLA, the number 1 team, for 35 minutes. It was just the first 5 minutes. But how did that help? Did y'all gain some confidence from that week?
I don't know that you gain confidence in that moment. I think it's hard. I think moral victories are hard. I think, I think if that, say the TCU game had been like nip and tuck back and forth the whole, like we were just on this furious comeback, you know? And so I think it's more of this is what we got to do to be great, you know? And I think that's the messaging to this team. Like, the pieces are there, but they got to be there in the first minute. They have to be there in the 22nd minute. And, you know, if you want to win a league championship, you're going to have to beat a TCU. You're going to have to go on the road and beat a Kansas State. You're going to have to do those things. And you look at Kansas State and then in TCU, and they're the only rosters that are more veteran than our own, you know? And so do I think playing against elite teams like makes you think like we got to be better? Yes. I think it can reset your mindset and give you a little bit of like, it's an exam, and maybe we didn't pass it, but did we get a B? Maybe we got a B minus, you know, but you got to get an A to win the league. So I do think, I don't think it made us believe that we're not capable of competing with anyone in the country, but we got to get better, and we've got to understand, you know, Mosley asked me on the radio today, like, you know, kind of about, you know, starting games and, you know, and it's like, what are we learning from some of those games? And I'm still learning how to make Nettie effective against players that are as big as her, you know, and we've gone at people with her early in games. And, you know, do I need to not do that when we're playing against someone of equal size or bigger than her, and not put her in a position where we're throwing it in there, we're not being effective, and we're getting behind, as opposed to like kind of getting in our flow, getting in our ball screens, getting, you know, as opposed to like, we're going to run a cross screen, we're going to run some kind of action to go inside right away. And go to her and trying to get her going early. Maybe it's letting her, the action come, but it's been so effective in a lot of games. But those games in particular, when you look at our losses, we've had a hard time going inside and scoring early. We couldn't against Sedona. We didn't against Oklahoma State, 6'6" center. Like, we struggle with Betts. So do I need to do a better job getting her in different kinds of actions that allow her to have success early? And then all of a sudden those things, she's not pressing. But that's what happens when you have players that, you know, they may be veteran, but you're coaching them for the first time. I know the buttons to push with Bella and Bugs, you know, but you're still trying to find those things out sometimes with an Aaliyah, who I've had for a few weeks, you know, or Nettie.
Tomorrow being Girl and Women in Sports Day, some that you know, that paved the path for you, that kind of thing? Are there people that you looked up as you were going, and do you embrace the role of, there's probably a lot of girls looking up to you now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So my mom was from a small town, my mom and dad, and my mom's only options growing up were cheer and band. And so it just, a part of me just doesn't get it. I really don't get that, because I don't think there was ever a moment in my life. You know, I had to play a lot of boys sports. I played boys little league. I played rec league, boys basketball, you know, into middle school. So I think things have changed since I played, but certainly opportunities were always there, post Title IX. And so, you know, when I think about, like, I don't remember not kicking a ball, throwing a ball, being in the backyard with my dad throwing a football, him hitting fly balls to me. We had an acre next to us, so, you know, he would make me just start running and yell right shoulder, left shoulder, and I was turning and catching fly balls over either shoulder, because with my dad, nothing was for fun. Everything was like teaching, training. We're going to you know, like, we're not just going to play catch. By gosh, we're running routes. And so, like, that's probably a little bit why I'm wired the way I'm wired. But, you know, I think my first, like, kind of heroes in sport, I wanted to be an elite tennis player when I was young, and Chris Evert, Martina Navratilova. I just remember, I mean, Sunday mornings, laying in my parents' bed because the French Open was on at 8 a.m. and watching them and seeing how they competed, and such different type athletes, you know, but I wanted to be the next Chris Evert at the time. But I think that's a lot of it. And then, you know, I saw on Facebook my high school volleyball coach, when I played at Platteville High School, passed away last week at 76 years old. And it just took me back to Kathy Herbst was the first coach I ever had that didn't treat me like a girl. Like I just remember thinking as a freshman in high school, and I had good coaches. It's not like, but we were athletes. We weren't girls. Like we were pushing towels on that gym floor. We were running hills. We were doing everything the football team was out there doing. And I remember wanting to play for a female in college because of her. Now I played for really good men as well. So it's not, but that stood out to me that she was the first person that really was like, there's nothing that you can't do that the boys, do. And I would say the only thing she very much failed me in my life was teaching me to be a better bowler, because she was our PE teacher. And the one thing I'm just not very good at is bowling. I don't know why. But she wanted me to be a professional bowler at 16. And, but other than that, I think those were two people that really, really impacted me.
To that point, we were talking about WNBA moves that were going on, and a lot of former Baylor players are in the news and highlighted, and it's been over the past few years in my lifetime that we're getting full news cycles about WNBA moves and transactions. What does that do for your brand, or for Baylor's brand, when you see all of the traction that former players from Baylor are getting in the WNBA?
Yeah, it's fun. The only thing that blew up all the Nalissa Dejanay stuff was freaking Luca. Like, come on. Like the free agency cycle was pretty exciting there with the WNBA, and then all of a sudden the Luca AD trade blew everything, right? Locally, nationally, one of the bigger surprises probably in sports history. So it's awesome. It's good to see Nalissa come back to an organization. Obviously, the GM of the Wings now is a very close friend of mine. I worked for. He was in my wedding. The new head coach there I worked with the son. We're very close. He's basically best friends with Michael Mata, my ops. They grew up together at Old Dominion, and Michael worked for Chris's sister Belle at Dartmouth. So, it's just like this small coaching world that we're in. But I think the idea of what's going on with Athletes Unlimited, the success Unrivaled is having, I don't know how much you guys know, but Chloe Pavlik, who was here for 2 years as our assistant coach, has had a huge involvement with Unrivaled, and never surprised when things that she touched turned to gold. But from TNT picking them up to in-studio stuff to the sponsorships that they've gotten through Unrivaled, it's an incredible time in women's sports, professional sports, basketball in particular. And so, yeah, we get Dejanay, we get Nalissa, but Kalani's headed west to Phoenix now. So all those trips that we usually make to Dallas to see former players, we'll have 2 there full time now. But BG in Atlanta, go figure. I work for Carl Semesco. He's never had a center in his life. Now he went out in free agency and got 2 of them. So I don't know if Bree Jones and Griner are going to be out there at the same time shooting threes, but nothing would surprise me with Carl. So it should be a fun summer for sure. And then you're going to see it blow up again next year, because with the new CBA, no one's signing for more than a year. So we're going to be in a even bigger cycle next year at this time. But it's good. I think the popularity, Caitlin Clark turning down the NBA All-Star game and saying she's going to shoot in the WNBA All-Star game. We've got some powerful people in women's sports right now. Asia Wilson's shoe, first drop is coming out in May. So a really, really exciting time for women's sports. So perfect time to talk about it as well.
Yeah, well, not to derail this conversation, but back to Houston.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The new look Big 12, you don't play everyone twice. In the old look Big 12, round robin. What are you telling some of your younger players about sort of the scouting that they're doing against y'all and y'all are doing against them, and everybody knows everybody in these sort of matchups?
Yeah, I think the interesting stretch we had was when we played the 4 new teams, the Pac-12 teams all in a row. Obviously we played Colorado again, and I'm sure they'll be waiting for us at altitude without gas masks, or oxygen mask. But I think it's every player on our team knows that you get scouted differently in conference play, period. Like, there's two reasons why. One, you've played against these teams, whether it was last year or multiple times in your career. And two, now you're 20 games in. There's that much more film on you. Your tendencies are established. You're 2 games in, and no one knows what we're going to do with Nettie yet. So they're guessing. Players get better. But ultimately, like, by this time of year, everything's driven by what is a team willing to give up? What are they trying to take away? Do you play into that, or do you stay and play to your strengths? And certainly, I think that's what we're telling them. Like, it's if they're forcing you left, they're forcing you left for a reason. And I think from that perspective, if they're giving you shots, they're giving you shots for a reason. Now, do defensive break down? Do good players get open shots? Absolutely. I think you can manipulate the D and screen it and move it and get to great shots. But ultimately, you do have to execute at a different level in conference play. You have to execute at a different level down the stretch when you're starting to be fatigued from the season as well. That was the thing that was so great about seeing the ball go through the basket for this team was, this is the time that you want to be playing your best basketball. And certainly we can only play our best basketball if our best shooters are making shots, And so it's one thing when we can't get them shots, but when we get them shots and they can't make them, that makes it real hard to do my job. It's very, very easy to do my job when the ball goes through the net, when we get an open shot. So from that perspective, it's the time of year where you want to see the ball go through the basket.
Okay, it's quite obvious Matharu is starting to reach your
Warm up.
Yeah, well, she's obviously reaching the expectations you had for her joining the program. You may have talked about this before, but I hadn't heard it. As much as you're comfortable telling us, how exactly did she end up here without just saying she entered the portal? Why did she come here? How did you get involved with her? I mean, to me, that's a pretty big story because it's very unusual to happen at midterm. So could you?
Yeah, I
brief us on
certainly
that?
won't go deep in the weeds on like maybe why she went into the portal, but what I will tell you is, when Aaliyah left Texas, she was interested in Baylor, and quite frankly, we were not interested in her, and not because she's not a talented player. It was timing wise. It was outside the portal window. We were at the time working on getting Dre and Asia in school and jumping through a lot of hoops. And so I thought at that point, anyone that wasn't a grad transfer and it wasn't the one-time transfer exception, because everything's changed in 2 years. But at the time, if you didn't go into the portal and you at the right time, you'd already transferred once and you weren't graduating, it was just like, now's not the right time. She sat a year at Florida when she left Texas because of that. So certainly well aware of her. Her agent is someone we've worked with in the past. I think they knew how we play fits what she's good at, the way we utilize guards. So they reached out to us to ask us if we were interested in her, and that was it. I mean, there were other schools that called her, but it was more about, okay, we will be willing, and of course we hadn't lost Jana yet, but we're willing to take you, but here are the parameters. And I think it was just like a really, really honest, really real conversation. And I think what Aaliyah has done, I think the unique challenge is coming to a team and fitting in the middle of the season is very hard for anyone, especially someone who has had the keys to the car for the last year, and probably any shot was a good shot for them. And to try to like integrate yourself, I had to get to the point with her where it was like, stop being so nice. Like it's time to assert yourself. Like it's good to fit in, but now it's time to stand out. you know, and there's a right way to do that. There's a right and wrong way. But it's like, if you're not proving to me in practice every day, like why you need to get more minutes, I'm not going to base it off of what did you do at Florida 8 months ago, because that's not where we're at. So I think as she's started to understand what we do and is in the right position, I can deal with her forgetting a play. You know, what I can't have her be is not playing our defense, not being in the right spot, you know, like those, you know, like she may run a side out wrong and I can talk her through that in the future. But I think it's knowing what do you do well, are you doing those things, you know, and I think with her and Yaya coming off the bench, they can give us such a punch, you know, and really, Aaliyah can be really good on the ball. She just fouls too much. And if she stops fouling, you know, she'll stay out there longer as she continues to kind of get in better and better game shape. I mean, there's a reason why she never played more than 24 minutes a game. You know, like, and a lot of it was she likes to hit you. Like, it's the ball, and I want to get it, and I'm going to slap you. And not purposely. She just sees it and goes for it. And so I think for her, it's been about how do I integrate? How do I figure out where to pick my spots? I don't think she's ever turned down an open shot, but when do I, like, she is more capable of making plays off the bounce than she's shown. Like, you've seen little glimpses of it. But she has elite body control when she gets into the paint. She can get the ball up on the glass at a lot of different angles. She's got really good footwork, you know, can play off one, can play off two. So it's about the little things, you know, making sure that she's doing things the right way. And with her and Yaya, like the first thing I always tell Yaya when she goes in the game is get ahead of the ball, get ahead of the ball, get ahead of the ball. Because the one thing that we have, with our starters, we put our best defensive lineup on the floor to start. Like that is our best defensive lineup. But Sarah rarely gets ahead of the ball. Bella rarely gets ahead of the ball. So we have Nettie and Bugs running, but we don't have a lot of wing pressure in transition. As soon as Yaya comes in, she usually gets a early up, attack, layup, you know, something good happens. And Aaliyah can do the same thing. Like your job should be, I'm fresh, I'm coming in, I'm going to get ahead of the ball so that whether it's Jada or Sarah that they've come in for, we have the ability to throw it ahead and play to numbers with an early up rather than an attack, a drag, a step up with our point guards. So there you go. In the next TV, you'll watch that. We get ahead of the ball more with those two than we do. If you notice, Bella shoots a lot of trail threes. Like a lot of the threes she gets, she's pacing herself and walking in to threes. She doesn't get a lot of, we're going to throw it ahead to her, and she's attacking the basket early. Mm-hmm. All right.